Today we're going to read a story called Don't Squeal Unless It's a Big Deal, A Tale of Tattletales by Jeanie, Franz, Ransom. Let's take a second to think about what this story might mean. What does squeal mean? What is a big deal? What does it mean to be a tattletale? There were 19 students in Miss McNeil's class and 19 tattletales. It all started when Jessica trotted up to Miss McNeil's desk. "Peter pulled my pigtail." "That must have hurt," Miss McNeil said. "Did you tell Peter that?" Jessica nodded. Miss McNeil said, "Let's see what Peter has to say." Peter dragged his hoofs all the way up to Miss McNeil's desk. "Jessica says you pulled her pigtail," Miss McNeil said. "I did not," Peter said. "Yes, you did," Jessica said. "You both have the right to say how you feel," Miss McNeil said. "You also have the right to feel safe and comfortable at school. Rules like keep your hooves to yourself make it easier to do that." Miss McNeil added, "But since Jessica's tail is still attached, and Peter doesn't look particularly dangerous at the moment, I think it's safe to go back to your desk now." Jessica stomped, Peter snorted, and Miss McNeil started humming The Farmer in the Dell. Miss McNeil had just lifted her cup of slop for a quick slurp when Stephen trotted up. "Rachel took my pink marker and she won't give it back. I even asked her 2 times. Miss McNeil put down her cup. "Stephen, I'm glad you tried to fix the problem yourself first by talking to Rachel," she said. "Maybe her ears aren't working too well today. Let's find out." "Stephen can't find his pink marker," Miss McNeil said. "Have you seen it?" "I gave it back," Rachel cried. "I can't find my pink marker." "That's because you used it all up," Peter said. "You're always drawing pictures of pigs." Rachel sniffed. "For your information, those are pictures of moi." "What am I supposed to do? Color myself green?" "You know our class rule, Rachel," said Miss McNeil. "If you want to borrow something, ask first. It's how friends treat friends and stay friends." Miss McNeil had just taken her first sip of slop when Megan announced, "Frankie called Sookie a fat sow." Miss McNeil had to gulp her slop before she could speak. "I'm glad you know our class rules so well," Miss McNeil said. "You're right. We don't call each other names. Also, we don't try to fix problems that don't belong to us," Miss McNeil said. "I know you're trying to help, but if Frankie and Sookie have a problem, it's their job to fix it. If they can't, it's my job as the teacher to help them. Your job," Miss McNeil added, "is to take care of you. That's the most important job you can have." Megan danced a jig all the way back to her desk, but then the stampede started. "Robbie breathed on me." "Jonathan read my paper." "Emily called my desk a pigsty." "Lauren looked at me." "Jeremy's grunting and I can't concentrate." The students had practically worn a path to Miss McNeil's desk and worn out her patience. When she stood up, the students sat down. "Before we go to lunch, I think we need to add a new rule to our list," Miss McNeil said. A very important rule, she added. Can anyone tell me what squealing is? Students started squealing like their tails were stuck in a gate. Not that kind of squealing, Miss McNeil shouted, waving a cowbell. When the class was quiet, Miss McNeil continued. Squealing, she said, is my special word for tattling, and I know you all know what that is. Miss McNeil started writing on the board. Here's our new class rule, Miss McNeil said. What does it mean? Jessica asked. I'm glad you asked, Miss McNeil said. To squeal on someone means you go tell a grown-up when someone does or says something you don't like, instead of telling that person first. Most problems that happen between kids are kid-sized problems. They can work out themselves. Miss McNeil said, usually by talking, listening, and helping each other. But sometimes, Miss McNeil said, something happens that's bigger than a kid-sized problem, like when someone is hurt or in danger, or when a person is hurting you, or hurting a pet, or hurting something that doesn't belong to them or that belongs to all of us. That's when it's okay to squeal, because it's a big deal. When it's a big deal, it's an emergency. That's when you need to hoof it and get help from a grown-up. But that afternoon, Miss McNeil had barely closed the classroom gate when Katie said, Jeanie hogged the rope swing at recess. Miss McNeil pointed to the board. Remember what we just learned? Katie nodded. Then you know you need to tell Jeanie first about the problem. Tell me what? Jeanie yelled across the room. That you were hogging the swing, Katie yelled back. You never asked for a turn, Jeanie said. I didn't get a turn, Jeremy said. It's not my fault, Peter said. Not this time. It's Caroline's fault, Suki said. Who's Caroline? Oscar asked. She's not even in our class, Frankie said. Thump! Miss McNeil had disappeared. Are you okay? Megan asked. Miss McNeil didn't answer. Her eyes were closed. Her tail was limp. One ear had something red on it. Quick! Call the office! Tell them it's emergency! Somebody get the nurse! Somebody tell Miss Hamill next door! Later that afternoon, the students visited Miss McNeil in the nurse's office. We're sorry we squealed so much today, Jessica said. We didn't mean to make you mad, Peter said. It's all our fault, Katie cried. It wasn't anybody's fault, Miss McNeil said. It was an accident. I slipped on some spilled slop. It must have been quite a mess. We thought you had exploded, Jeremy said. It was pretty gross, Oscar added. Maybe you better not eat that stuff anymore, Rachel said. You need to take care of yourself. It sounds like all of you took care of the problem, Miss McNeil said. Everyone says you knew just what to do when I got hurt. Only because you're such a good teacher, Jessica said. And you're such good learners, Miss McNeil said. We still need some practice, Katie said. We all do when we learn something new. Don't squeal! It's a big deal!